When the lantern went out, the dark swallowed me whole. I couldn't see the walls, the bell, or even my own hands. But I felt them, small, cold fingers gripping my arms, my shoulders tugging at my coat. They weren't heavy, but their persistence was terrifying. "Let go," I shouted, thrashing. My voice bounced back at me, distorted like the school itself was mocking me. The children's chant had stopped. Now there was only the sound of their breathing. Dozens of tiny lungs, inhaling in rhythm, close enough for the damp warmth of it to brush my skin. I reached into my pocket, fumbling for the matches I'd brought. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped them. A scrape, a spark, and light flared to life. The sight made my stomach lurch. The children stood frozen, their faces inches from mine, eyes wide, pupils dilated until they were nothing but black voids. Their mouths hung open, but no sound escaped. Dust clung to their hair, their clothes, their skin, as if they had been sitting here for decades, waiting. I staggered backward, clutching the tiny flame. Shadows stretched across the walls, grotesque and shifting, not matching the bodies they belonged to. The match burned down, singeing my fingers. I dropped it with a hiss. Darkness reclaimed the room, but this time something else moved with me. Not small hands, larger, rougher, fingers that wrapped around my wrist with a strength that nearly broke bone. I froze. That grip, I knew it. It was my mother's. Her voice rose in the dark, whispering against my ear. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The bell above roared, deafening, and all the children screamed. The grip on my wrist was ice cold, but impossibly strong. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The whisper still lingered in my ear. "Why didn't you come sooner?" A voice I knew too well, yet twisted, hollow, as if echoing from the bottom of a grave. "Mother." The word tore from my throat before I could stop it. My voice sounded small, like a child's. The children surrounded me in silence now. They no longer reached for me, no longer chanted. They simply watched, their faces slack, their eyes glistening in the faint reflection of my trembling match. I forced another flame to life. For a moment the flicker revealed her, standing at the front of the classroom. My mother. Her figure was gaunt, draped in the same grey dress I remembered her wearing in the last photograph taken before she vanished. Her hair, once neat, hung in dishevelled strands. Her eyes locked onto mine, empty, yet burning with something I couldn't name. "You were supposed to take my place," she said, her voice reverberating through the room. The bell overhead trembled at her words. The lesson must never end. The match scorched my fingers again. I dropped it, plunging the room into shadow. Yet I could still see her. Her outline glowed faintly, as if the walls themselves carried her shape. The children began tapping their pencils in rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. The sound spread like a pulse, syncing with the pounding of my heart. I backed toward the door, desperate to escape. But when I pulled, it didn't budge. The desks had shifted, barricading it shut. "Sit," my mother commanded. Her voice cracked like thunder. The children turned their gaze back to me. Dozens of chairs scraped across the floor at once, leaving one desk in the front row open. Waiting. I understood then. There was no leaving, not unless I obeyed. The bell rang again, shaking dust from the rafters. My knees buckled under the weight of its sound, and with dread sinking deep into my bones, I lowered myself into the empty seat. I sat at the front desk because the desks had willed it, not because I agreed. The wood was cold, so cold it felt wet, and the groove where decades of nervous hands had carved initials dug into my palm like little teeth. The children stared without blinking. Behind them, the iron bell swayed, though no rope moved, humming a tone I felt in my lungs. My mother drifted between aisles, not quite walking. Her feet didn't seem to decide on the floor. "Attendance," she said, and the pencils lifted like metronomes. Tap, tap, tap. A roll book slammed onto my desk, raising dust that smelled like old chalk and damp wool. "You will read the names," she said. "I'm not—" The rest died in my mouth. Something in the air tightened around my throat. I opened the book. The first page was dated the year she vanished. I recognized some surnames from town cemeteries, from stones I had traced as a child to feel the grooves of letters. The column marked present was filled with check marks, except one row where my mother's handwriting had written a word that crawled, "Listen." I read the first name. A small hand rose. Not a wave. A lifting, like a soul trying to remember how to be heavy. Present, the boy whispered through a split lip, and frost spilled from his mouth. I called the next and the next, each voice scraping through the room like chairs dragged over stone. The taps of the pencils kept time with my pulse. Halfway down the page, I stopped. There, in the middle of the names, written in a darker ink that had not faded, sat my own, my name now. I'm not a student, I said, throat burning. My mother tilted her head, as if measuring where the lie began. Everyone who hears the bell is a student. The room seemed to lean toward me. Present, the class breathed in one voice. I turned the page. Dates ran backward. A century of attendance collapsed into a thinning column until the names dissolved into scratches. In the margin, a line etched so hard it had cut the paper. When the eraser falls, run. As if on cue, an old felt eraser rolled off the chalk rail and hit the floor with a soft thud. No one moved. The bell thrummed lower, and the windows blackened, as if night had pressed its face against the glass. Lesson, my mother said. What am I supposed to teach? She pointed at the chalkboard. Beneath the repeated sentence, listen to them. A faint diagram was ghosted, erased but not gone. A floor plan of the school, with a door drawn where no door existed. A circle marked the bell tower. A second circle marked something beneath it. In careful letters, basement classroom. There is no basement, I said, though cold air rose from between the floorboards. You will take them there, she said, and you will finish what I began. The eraser moved again, sliding toward the far wall, as if pulled by a current I couldn't feel. It stopped against a seam in the boards. Something beneath knocked back, 3 sharp raps from under my feet. The children stood in a single motion. Their chairs didn't scrape this time. They lifted just slightly, as if gravity were a suggestion. My mother lifted her hand to the bell. Her fingers passed through iron. It rang anyway. The seam widened. I never wanted to come back here. The school where my mother spent the last years of her life as the only teacher, abandoned since the day she vanished. The town whispered about ghosts in the classrooms, about children's laughter echoing when no one was inside. I told myself it was just folklore until the inheritance papers arrived, with my name on them. The school was mine now. A place where every door had been locked for decades. A place where my mother's chalkboard still had the last lesson she ever wrote. And a place where I would learn that some walls do not keep silence. They remember. What I found inside those classrooms still wakes me up at night. The shadows that moved, the voices that knew my name, and the faces, God, the faces of children I had never seen, but who seemed to know me. This isn't just my story, it's a testimony. And if you're watching, don't ever step into a place the world has chosen to forget. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Here we share the kind of stories most people are too afraid to tell. Your support helps us keep uncovering them. I stood at the rusted gates of the school, clutching the envelope that carried my mother's handwriting, her will, her last words, her choice to leave this place to me. The gates groaned when I pushed, as though they resisted opening after so many years. Dust and vines clung to the metal. Behind them, the building loomed like a patient predator, windows blackened with time. The first thing I noticed wasn't the silence. It was the smell. Rot, old paper, and something sharp like iron. Memories of childhood surfaced, though I had never studied here. My mother had kept me away, refusing to let me enter when she was alive. She said the place was not safe anymore, and yet she spent her final years locked inside its walls, teaching. Who exactly? The wooden steps creaked under my weight. My hand trembled as I turned the key. The lock resisted, then clicked open with a sound so loud it seemed to echo across the empty yard. I stepped inside. Dust motes floated in the air, caught in streaks of pale light from the broken roof. Desks were scattered. Papers left as if students had fled mid-lesson. On the chalkboard, faded but legible, were words in my mother's handwriting. Listen to them. I froze. Her last lesson, still there, untouched. A draft swept across the room, flipping pages, and I swear I heard it then. faint like a memory whispered through the walls, children laughing, but when I turned, the desks were empty. I should have left that same afternoon, but something in me resisted. Maybe it was the smell of chalk still lingering in the air, or the strange way my mother's words, "Listen to them," seemed to anchor me. I told myself I would stay one night, just one, to explore and gather her belongings. The sun dipped fast, as if darkness was eager to claim the building. Shadows stretched long across the hallways. I carried a lantern, its beam slicing through the dust, revealing rows of lockers coated in rust, and names scratched deep into the metal. Some were familiar, children from Old Town records, but others didn't belong to anyone alive. The teacher's lounge was almost intact. A teapot sat on the counter, dry rings marking where cups once rested. My mother's coat still hung from a hook, brittle with age. I ran my fingers across it and felt a lump in the pocket. Inside was a folded note, her handwriting shaking across the paper. "Do not go after the bell." I stared at it, confusion wrapping itself around my chest. The bell tower had been dismantled decades ago. At least that's what I thought. Night fell fully then. The school changed with it. The air grew colder, thick with a weight that pressed on my lungs. My lantern flickered, struggling to hold back the dark, and then, at exactly midnight, the sound came, clear, metallic, echoing from above the rafters. The bell rang. The ringing froze me where I stood. 1, 2, 3 chimes, deep metallic echoing through the halls. The sound didn't just pass through my ears. It pressed into my chest, rattling inside my bones. I knew the bell tower had been dismantled long before I was born. And yet, here it was, calling out from above me. I lifted the lantern. Its glow trembled against the cracked plaster of the hallway. Each step toward the stairs felt heavier, as if the air itself was thickening, resisting me. My mother's note, "Do not go after the bell," burned in my pocket. But the pull of it was stronger than my fear. The staircase groaned as I ascended. The handrail was coated with dust so thick it clung like wet clay to my fingers. Halfway up, I swore I heard something behind me. The shuffle of shoes too small to be an adult's, children's steps. I turned, lantern shaking, but the hallway below was empty. At the top, a door I didn't remember from childhood blocked my path. Heavy oak warped by time. But someone or something had carved words into it. Letters gouged deep with a blade. "Class in session." My hand hesitated on the knob. The bell tolled again, closer, louder. I pushed. The door swung open. Inside was a space that should not have been there. The bell tower, perfectly intact. Dust-covered rafters stretched upward, and in the center hung a massive iron bell, its surface glistening with condensation. Beneath it, lined in neat rows, were desks, and sitting in them were children. Their faces were pale, half-shadowed, their eyes fixed on me, silent, expectant. One boy at the front tilted his head. His lips moved, and though no sound came, I understood. He mouthed the words slowly, deliberately. "You're late." I should have run. Any sane person would have. But I didn't. The children, if that's what they were, didn't move as I stepped into the room. My lantern's glow washed over them, revealing skin that looked less like flesh and more like parchment stretched too thin. Some had ink stains on their fingers, others clutched pencils sharpened to splinters. Their clothes were outdated, faded uniforms from decades past, and yet, their eyes, they were alive, too alive. Wide and unblinking, fixed on me with a familiarity that made my stomach twist. "Who are you?" I whispered. My voice cracked, a foreign sound in the heavy silence. At once, every child lifted a hand in unison, like a class answering roll call. Their voices rose, but not in speech. A murmur of whispers flooded the air, layered and overlapping. I couldn't make out words, only the cadence, like a lesson recited by memory. Then from the back a girl stood. Her braids were tied with ribbons, one hanging loose as if it had been tugged. She stepped forward, eyes locked on mine, and in a voice clearer than the rest, she said, "You're the teacher's child." The words struck me like a blow. My mother never spoke of her students, never mentioned a class. And yet these faces, they knew me. The bell above groaned, vibrating as though stirred by something unseen. The children didn't flinch. Instead, Their whispers merged into a single chant, one phrase repeating louder, louder, "Teach us! Teach us! Teach us!" The desks rattled. Dust fell from the rafters. My lantern sputtered. I backed toward the door, desperate to escape. My hand touched the knob, but the girl blocked my path. Her pale face inches from mine. "You can't leave," she breathed. "Not until you finish her lesson." The girl's words clung to me like frost. "Not until you finish her lesson." I forced myself to look at the chalkboard that stood against the far wall of the bell tower. My lantern flickered, but enough light fell across it to reveal something I hadn't noticed before. My mother's handwriting, faint, smeared, but unmistakable, covered the board. It wasn't a math equation or a history note. It was a sentence repeated again and again, filling every inch of black slate. Listen to them, the same words I had seen downstairs. Only here they were layered, overlapping, written with desperation, until the chalk had nearly carved grooves into the board. The children's chant grew louder. "Teach us! Teach us!" Their voices no longer sounded like whispers, but like a storm, pressing against the walls, rattling the iron bell above us. My heart pounded. I staggered toward the board, hand trembling, as if some unseen force was pulling me closer. And then I saw it. Beneath the final line of writing, a fresh phrase carved so deep it had bitten into the wood beneath the slate. It was my name. I stumbled back. My mother had written this, long before I was meant to inherit the school. Long before I stood here, the girl's small hand reached out, chalk between her fingers. She offered it to me with eyes that were far too knowing. "Continue," she whispered. I shook my head, backing away, but the desks scraped forward in unison. The children leaned closer, their mouths opening, not in words, but in a hollow wail that pierced the air. My lantern went out, and in that suffocating darkness, I felt dozens of tiny hands grasping my arms, pulling me toward the chalkboard. We found the seam by lantern and touch, not by sight. The boards were warped around it, as if heat had once swelled them and cold had frozen the swell into a new shape. I slipped my fingers into the crack. Air rose from below, wet, metallic, breathless. My mother watched without blinking. "Open it," she said. "I don't have tools." "You do." She nodded toward the chalk tray. A rusted key lay there, chalk dust clotted in its teeth. I didn't remember seeing it before. When I lifted it, the bell hummed like approval. The key fit a lock I couldn't see. I twisted, wood shivered, and a hatch lifted an inch on its own. Beneath, stairs spiraled into dark. The children formed a line without a sound, hands folded, heads bowed as if for a procession. I went first. Each step answered with a damp note, water speaking through timber. On the fourth step, the lantern hissed and dimmed. "Keep going," my mother said from behind me, though I hadn't heard her feet touch the stairs. Her voice felt as if it came from my own chest. The air thickened to syrup. My ears popped. Somewhere below, something metal scraped stone. When we reached the bottom, the lantern steadied, showing a corridor carved from the school's foundation. Old posters peeled from the walls, phonics charts, multiplication tables, a map where oceans had faded to the color of milk. Every surface was wet with condensation, yet no drops fell. At the end of the corridor waited a door of black-painted wood. A plaque above it, eaten by rust, offered 3 letters that refused to die: B-R-E. The bell hummed again. Lower now, almost a growl, I opened the door. The classroom was small. A perfectly preserved, desks bolted to the floor. On each desk sat a slate and a stub of chalk, as if the lesson had ended moments ago. The teacher's desk held a ledger like the one upstairs, but this one was bound in leather gone soft with time. Its first page bore a title in my mother's hand, "Remedial Attendance." "What is this?" I whispered. My mother's reply was flat. "Detention." My skin pricked. "For what?" "For leaving," she said. The children filed to their seats. They did not look at me. Their shadows did not follow them. I approached the ledger. Page after page carried lists of names under the same date, the day the school closed. Each page ended with an empty box where a check mark should have been. At the bottom, a note written with a torn nib. Release after completion. Completion of what? The bell roared from directly above, as if the tower's throat opened to the room. The desks trembled. The slates shivered. Lines began to draw themselves across the board, white marks scratching into symbols I did not recognize. Not letters, not numbers. Something older. The pattern twisted until it resembled a grid of seats seen from above. The last square remained empty. The chalk hung in the air, waiting, pointed at me like a finger. Sit, my mother said. My legs moved without permission. The chair felt like ice. A strap slid over my wrists and tightened. Another locked across my chest, then my throat. I gasped soundlessly. My mother stepped to the board and wrote a single sentence beneath the grid. Listen until they stop. The chalk fell. The lights died. And in the dark, someone took the empty seat beside me. The straps bit into my wrists and chest, pinning me to the desk. My throat burned where the leather pressed, and every breath felt shallow, stolen. The room was silent except for the faint drip of water somewhere beyond the walls. The children sat rigid, hands folded neatly, waiting. My mother stood at the board, chalk hovering inches above the surface, though her hand never touched it. And then I felt it, the weight of someone lowering themselves into the desk beside mine. The wood creaked. The air shifted, but when I turned, no one was there. Only the faint indentation of a body pressing the seat downward. The hair on my arms rose. I couldn't speak. My voice had abandoned me. The ledger on the teacher's desk flipped open on its own. Pages turned furiously, the sound like 100 wings beating in the dark. Then it stopped on a fresh page. Only 2 names written. Mine and a second. Smudged, but slowly bleeding through the paper like ink that had never dried. It was my mother's name. The chalk scrawled across the board in violent strokes. Final lesson. The children repeated it, voices low at first, then swelling into a chorus. Final lesson. Final lesson. The bell above moaned, its tone warping as if strained past the metal's limits. Dust rained down. My desk rattled beneath me. Beside me, the empty seat shifted again. This time I smelled something. Familiar. Lavender. The perfume my mother used to wear when tucking me into bed. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Finish it, her voice whispered, not from the front of the room, but from inches away, where no one sat. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. But when I opened them again, chalk marks had appeared on my desk. Words scratched deep into the wood grain, as if carved by invisible hands. You were always meant to replace me. The straps tightened, cutting circulation from my hands. Panic surged through me. I twisted, pulling with every ounce of strength until something gave. The leather snapped loose from one wrist. I yanked my arm free and slammed it against the other strap, tearing until I was loose. The children didn't react. They just stared, eyes wide, mouths forming silent words. I staggered up, the desk screeching against the floor. My lantern was gone, swallowed by shadow. The only light came from the board, glowing faintly where the chalk had written. Final lesson, the children whispered in unison. Not chanting now, but pleading. The air thickened, pressing against my ribs. The bell above roared one last time, so loud it splintered the rafters, and the seat beside me was no longer empty. A hand, pale and skeletal, reached across the desk and grasped mine. The hand that closed around mine was brittle as paper. Yet its grip was unbreakable, skin stretched thin over bone, fingers icy and trembling, but strong enough to root me in place. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out, only a strangled rasp, as though the air itself refused to carry my voice. I forced myself to look. At first, there was only shadow. Then slowly a face emerged in the half-light. My mother's face, or something wearing it. Her eyes were wide, glassy, reflecting not lantern light but something deeper, a glow that came from inside. "You were always part of this," she whispered, her lips barely moving. Her words rattled through me, vibrating in my teeth. "The school doesn't forget its teacher, or her child." I pulled, but her grip did not loosen. My wrist ached as her nails dug crescent moons into my skin. I tried to wrench free, but each movement seemed to sink me deeper into her grasp, like roots tightening around stone. The children shifted in unison, desks scraping forward an inch, their faces tilted upward toward the bell tower ceiling. I followed their gaze. Cracks split across the plaster, raining dust onto their pale hair. Something darker than shadow seeped through the fractures, like ink spreading through paper. The board glowed again. New words appeared in frantic scrawls. Do not resist, join. The air turned electric. My heart pounded so violently I thought my chest might crack. My mother leaned closer, her scent of lavender now mingled with something foul, like soil from a grave. You will take my place, she said, and they will finally rest. Her voice broke on that last word, as if she were begging instead of commanding. For a heartbeat, I saw the woman I remembered, the tired teacher, the mother who sang to me at night. But it flickered, gone in an instant, swallowed by the thing holding my wrist. No, I croaked. My throat felt shredded, but the word escaped. The room reacted violently. The bell shrieked so loud my ears bled. The children slammed their hands against their desks, the sound like thunder rolling through stone. My mother's face twisted, a mask of fury and grief. You will not leave, she hissed. With a surge of terror-fueled strength, I tore free. Skin ripped where her nails had pierced me, blood running hot across my hand. I stumbled back, crashing into a row of desks. The children didn't move to stop me this time. They only watched, their eyes shining with something unreadable. Hope? Hunger? My mother rose to her full height, taller than I remembered, her shadow spilling across every wall. Her voice dropped into something deeper, something that didn't belong to her at all. The lesson isn't over. The floor shook beneath my feet. Cracks widened. The seams of the basement classroom groaned like a coffin lid forced open, and then, with one deafening roar, the bell above gave way. The bell didn't just fall. It tore through time. Iron screamed against stone, a sound so violent the air seemed to shear. The ceiling split, rafters collapsing in a storm of dust and cold. I threw my arms over my head as the bell smashed into the floor between the rows of desks, sticking half-sunk like a meteor. Cracks spidered out from the impact, racing under our feet and up the walls. The children didn't flinch. My mother didn't blink. When the dust thinned, I saw what the bell had struck. A square of floor where the boards were newer than the rest, nailed crosswise like a lid. The impact had punched it open. Beneath, not more stairs, boxes. Wooden archives bound with leather straps, their corners black with damp. My mother's voice throbbed through the room. Close it! I didn't. I ran. The straps on my wrists stung as I dropped to the hole and dragged the nearest box free. The leather gave with a wet sound. Inside, ledger books, brittle programs from school plays, a row of tarnished brass nameplates, and a reel-to-reel recorder, its reels mummified under a film of mold. A strip of masking tape was stuck to the metal casing. On it, in my mother's handwriting, last lesson. The children breathed in together. It sounded like surf pulling back before a break. Don't, my mother warned. Her shadow swelled across the walls, swallowing blackboards and faces. My hands shook so hard, the reels rattled. I set the machine on the teacher's desk and felt under it for a switch. Metal clicked. The motor coughed, word caught. The room's light dimmed, as if the machine were drawing it in, a hiss of static. Then her voice, but not the voice behind me, the voice I remembered from nights safe in a warm kitchen. If you're hearing this, the tape said, I failed. The children stiffened. My mother's shadow froze, head cocked. I tried to end the lesson, the tape went on, thin and papery, but the bell keeps time the way a heart does. The day the district shut us down, they wouldn't leave. The roll never finished. Attendance is a chain. Every name must answer. I thought I could keep them still, keep them calm until help came. Static swallowed a breath. No one came. I kept calling. They kept answering. We ran out of daylight. The door locked from the outside. I stared at the ledger open on the desk. Remedial attendance. Release after completion. I wrote, listen to them, because I thought listening was mercy. The tape whispered. It wasn't, it was consent. Her voice broke. If my child returns, if you ever hear this, do not take my place. Do not give the bell another mouth. Something moved in the corner. My mother, no, the thing wearing her, peeled away from the wall like a sticker lifted from glass. Her face was the same shape and nothing like it. Too smooth, too hollow. Lavender and grave dirt. Turn that off, she said, and every desk groaned as if sharing her throat. The tape fought the static. There is a way. Break attendance. Read every name and do not... The recording warped, dragged slow. Do not answer when they call yours. I flipped to the first page of the ledger with a frenzy that felt like prayer. Names in columns, check marks, one empty box at the end of each line like an open eye. My name appeared on the final page, dark and fresh. The children stood, their mouths opened. The bell, half buried, hummed low like blood. Read, the tape pleaded through snow. Release them. Stop, the thing hissed. The room leaned toward me. I snatched the ledger, lungs burning. Abigail Kerr. A tiny hand lifted. Present, a girl whispered. Frost feathered from her lips, and then, like a held breath let go, her outline thinned. The strap on her desk unbuckled by itself. Thomas Lyle. Present. His shoulders loosened, eyes closing for the first time. Behind me, the tape chewed itself to silence. The shadow of my mother stretched, thin as wire, angling toward my throat. I swallowed, heart ricocheting. My finger hovered over the last name on the page. Mine. The class inhaled as one. Say it, the thing breathed. I did. And every voice in the room answered, present. The moment every voice answered my name, the air collapsed in on itself. A pressure wave slammed through the room, rattling the desks, flickering the lantern light, and making my ears pop with pain. The ledger burned hot in my hands, pages curling at the edges as if they wanted to catch fire. I dropped it onto the desk, clutching my head. The children's voices still rang in my skull, echoing over and over, present, present, present. It was as though I had been added to their roll call, not just written, but spoken into the class. And once spoken, it could never be undone. My mother, if she was still my mother, smiled then, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Her shadow stretched up the wall, taller, broader, merging with the cracks in the ceiling until she seemed stitched into the building itself. "You've joined," she said. Her voice trembled with something like triumph, but also despair. "Now the chain will hold." The children sat straighter, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Their pencils rose again, tapping in rhythm like the beating of a second heart. The bell above, half buried in the floor, hummed so low it felt like the vibration of the earth itself. "No," I whispered. "I won't stay here. I won't be part of this. You already are," my mother said. "Your name was the last. Now the list is complete." The ledger on the desk flipped again, this time to the back cover. My blood ran cold. Etched into the leather, carved deep enough to split it, was a single line. The teacher must remain. The realization cut through me like a blade. She hadn't kept teaching all those years because she wanted to. She couldn't leave. The bell bound her here as the teacher, and now it wanted me. The children all turned their heads at once. Their mouths opened, but instead of words, a deep exhale poured out, like wind escaping 1,000 graves. It swept through the room, extinguishing what little light remained. In the pitch black, I heard my mother's voice again, but closer now, right against my ear. "You can free them," she said, "but not without cost." Her hand closed around mine again, but softer this time, trembling. "Break the attendance. Read every name backward. And make the roll." The ledger glowed faintly in the dark. My fingers traced its spine, but as soon as I tried to open it, the children screamed, high, furious, inhuman. Their desks rattled violently. The bell roared, louder than ever before. "You'll lose yourself," my mother whispered. "That's the price." Her face flickered in the dark, shifting between the woman I knew and the shadow that claimed her. For a moment I thought I saw tears. I clutched the ledger, heart hammering. I could hear the names, thousands of them, begging to be spoken. My own name bled darker than the rest, as if waiting for me to choose. And then the bell rang once more, cracking the floor wide open. Beneath us, the earth itself seemed to breathe. The floor gaped open, a wound in the school's foundation. Cold air surged up from the crack, carrying with it the faintest trace of voices. Hundreds, maybe thousands, layered over one another like waves crashing out of time. The ledger throbbed in my hands, its pages fluttering as though the book itself had lungs. My mother's shadow loomed across the wall. "Do it," she whispered, though her voice was thin, breaking. "Read them backward, and make the chain." The children hissed as one, their eyes glowing like coals. Desks screeched across the floor, scraping closer in rows, circling me like predators around prey. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide, and in every throat I saw darkness, not flesh. I opened the ledger. The names swam on the page, warping, resisting. My own name burned at the bottom, pulsing with each beat of the bell above. I forced myself to look higher, at the name above mine. My lips trembled as I spoke it. Michael Crowder. A shriek tore through the room. One boy slammed his fists against his desk, his body jerking backward as if pulled by unseen hands. His face blurred, cracked, then shattered into dust. And then he was gone. The others wailed, their voices shaking the rafters. I clung tighter to the book and called the next. Ruth Halley. Another child dissolved, her ribbons scattering like ashes in the air. One by one their desks emptied as I dragged each name back into silence. The air grew lighter, the shadows thinner. The bell groaned overhead, its tone weakening as though the metal itself resisted. But the more names I read, the heavier the ledger became. My hands ached as though I were lifting stone. My vision blurred. Blood dripped from my nose, soaking the paper. "Keep going," my mother urged. I gasped the next. And the next. Each name tore something from me, like a piece of myself was going with them. My chest burned, my head pounding like drums inside bone. At last, I reached the final two, hers and mine. I hesitated. The children were almost gone. Only the girl with the loose ribbon remained, her eyes locked on mine, silently begging. Behind her, my mother's shadow wavered, as though she were being pulled apart with them. "Read mine," my mother said. Her voice trembled. "Release me." Tears blurred my sight. My throat cracked, but I spoke it. "Margaret." Her name ripped from me like a blade through flesh. She shuddered, her form collapsing, breaking into fragments of dust and light. Her hand slipped from mine as she fell backward into the dark, gone. Only the girl remained. Only one name left, mine. The ledger glowed red. The bell overhead wailed like a wounded animal, shaking the entire tower. The girl whispered through the noise, "If you read it, you'll never leave." The floor split wider. The crack yawned open to black nothingness. I clenched the ledger in my bloodied hands. My name burned on the page, waiting. The bell rang once, then split down the middle, and everything fell silent. The silence after the bell broke was worse than the ringing. No air, no breath, just a void pressing against my chest. I stared at the page where my name pulsed like an open wound. Every instinct screamed to shut the book, to run, to leave this place behind. But the ledger would not close. Its spine locked, pages trembling, as if the very school held it open. The last child, the girl with the ribbon, stood before me. Her small hands clutched the edge of my desk, her head tilted, eyes burning like dying stars. "You have to," she whispered. Her voice was cracked, dry, older than her body. "We can't leave if you don't." My throat tightened. "If I read it, then I stay." She nodded slowly, a tear tracing down her ash-colored cheek. "The teacher always stays." I shook my head violently. "No, that's what my mother believed, but she wanted me to break it. She wanted me to end it." The girl stepped closer, her presence almost tender. "Endings cost. You don't erase a name without giving another." Her words cut through me. The ledger pulsed again, binding my gaze to it. My name scrawled across the page in ink that bled, spreading tendrils like veins. My mother's entry above it was fading, unraveling into dust that scattered across the margins. She was gone, free, but me, I was still written. The floor groaned. The school itself shuddered, beams creaking, plaster cracking. From the widening fissures in the walls, black smoke seeped out like a living tide. The children who had dissolved now whispered faintly in the smoke, voices faint but desperate. "Finish it. Finish it." The girl placed the piece of chalk into my palm. Her fingers were cold but gentle, like she pitied me. If you write over your name, the roll breaks. We'll all go. Even you. I stared at the chalk, trembling. Write over my name. Erase it. Destroy the chain. But the ledger was no ordinary book. My hand hovered above the page, and the instant the chalk touched it, agony tore through me. My skin blistered, bones screaming as though my very existence was being rewritten. The girl didn't flinch. She only watched, lips pressed thin, ribbon slipping loose from her braid. "Do it," she whispered. Before the bell tolls again, the crack in the ceiling groaned, light bleeding through for the first time in decades. A shaft of dawn cut into the room, pale but real. Outside, birds cried faintly, as if the world still existed beyond these walls. With a scream that felt like it came from my marrow, I dragged the chalk across the page, striking through my name. The sound was unbearable, like nails tearing through stone. The book shook violently, the ink screaming as it burned away. The children cried out, their voices rising, not in pain but in release. The girl smiled faintly, eyes softening, before her body dissolved into dust and light that swirled upward through the crack. The ledger slammed shut. The straps on my desk snapped open, and for the first time, the bell above was silent. When the ledger slammed shut, the silence was deafening. No bell, no whispers, no tapping pencils, only my ragged breath echoing in the hollow classroom. Dust drifted where the children had sat, their forms dissolved into nothing. The cracked ceiling above spilled pale light, streaking across the desks like a dawn that had finally remembered this place. For the first time, I believed it might be over. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, the chalk still clenched in my bloodied hand. The room felt lighter, emptier, but not empty enough. My skin prickled with the sense of being watched. The air, though warmer, carried weight. Her presence lingered, and then I heard it. A chair creaked at the back of the room. I turned. One desk was not empty. My mother sat there, her shape faint, translucent, eyes tired but human again. Not the shadow I had seen before, but the woman who used to pack my lunches and fall asleep correcting papers at the kitchen table. "You freed them," she whispered. Her voice shook with gratitude and sorrow. "But chains don't vanish. They change hands." I staggered back, shaking my head. "No, I erased my name. I broke it." She rose, her figure flickering with every step. "You didn't erase it. You replaced it." The ledger glowed faintly on the desk. Against my will, it cracked open. My name was gone. But in its place, written in fresh, dark strokes, was a new title, Teacher. The word bled through every page. Not a student, not a prisoner, something worse. The keeper. The floor beneath my feet groaned. The desk shifted back into perfect rows, and with each creak I felt the weight of eyes again. Not children this time, but something older, deeper. Shapes stirred in the cracks, shadows pressing against the walls as if waiting for a lesson to begin. "No," I whispered. "I won't do it. I won't teach." But the chalk in my hand moved on its own. My arm rose, dragging me to the board. White dust streaked across the black slate, my fingers writing words I didn't think, words that weren't mine. Listen to them. The sentence repeated, line after line, until the board was filled again. My voice followed, low, broken, speaking the words aloud. I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. Behind me, chairs creaked as invisible students sat. The faint sound of pencils tapping returned, steady as a heartbeat. Attendance was beginning again. I turned, desperate, eyes searching for my mother. But she was gone. Her chair was empty. The only sound left was the echo of my own voice. Calling roll, one by one, the shadows answered. Present, present, present. And when I reached the end, when no names were left to call but my own, I heard it, my voice, but not from my throat. From every desk, every wall, every shadow, present. The bell overhead shuddered, cracked, and began to toll once more, and I understood, too late. I wasn't the last teacher, I was the next.